recording. Hi, I'm Emily Levy, the founder and director of Scrutineers, and welcome today to all of you to the Introduction to Voter Signature Authentication training. This is part 1 of 2. The second part is next Saturday at the same time, and I want to apologize to anyone who was confused about the time. The time should display in our events and campaign in your time zone, and that is confusing to people, and I'm trying to get the software to the folks that run the software to make a change so that they show the time zone next to the time, which it doesn't do, and that's out of my control. So I apologize for any confusion that was caused. So today, I'm thrilled to have a special guest who we have hired to do this training for our community. And some of you may have heard me say that when I had the idea of this training, I thought it would be impossible to pull it off. And it turned out not only to be possible, but to be relatively simple. And I want to thank Jan Bendor for that, who's on our advisory committee and is the state director of the Michigan Election Reform Alliance. Jan, hi, I see that you're here today. And she told me she had done something similar with another trainer who I contacted and who led me to our guest trainer today, who's going to be doing this week's and next week's training. So I want to introduce to you Sheila Lowe. She's in Ventura, California. She's probably in the top left of your screen and waving hi to you. Among Sheila's many qualifications, she's a charter member of the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners, where she's chair of the ethics committee, and she's been awarded a lifetime achievement certification. She's the co-chair of the Safe Standards for Document Examiners, registered with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and she's also the president of the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation. That's a whole lot, Sheila, and I've checked you out online and your credentials are amazing. Watched some of your videos and things like that. So folks, and your website is sheilalowe.com, right? Is that?
That's my handwriting analysis website, yes. Okay. I have another one for my books, but that's it, yeah.
Okay, so, but people can find various links to your work there. If
yes.
So before I turn it over to Sheila, there's one thing that I want to make sure that you know, which is the expertise she's going to be sharing with us in signature authentication is used in a variety of fields, and her specialty, she doesn't have a specialty in elections. And so if you have questions related to how this applies to elections, we'll need to take those questions up at another time. You can join the circle that's related to this training that we created in Scrutineers, and we can discuss those things there and share resources there. So we're going to talk about the actual verification of signatures, but not how different counties do it or how the computers that participate in the process sometimes do it or things like that. So I just wanted to set your expectations for that. And now, Sheila, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Thank you for inviting me to do this. It's exciting to share this information with all of you from all over the place. And yeah, I started studying handwriting in 1967. Some of you are old enough to remember 1967. I was in high school at the time. But in 1985, I became qualified in court to testify as an expert in handwriting. And from that point on, I began specializing in handwriting authentication. So that's mostly what I do today. The other part is personality assessment from handwriting. That's now a very small part of my practice. So what I would like to ask you to do, does everybody have a pen and paper? Good, good, good. I want you to sign your name. You be signature virgins going into this, because after this, you're not going to look at your signature or anybody else's the same way. So go ahead and sign your name, just however you normally do it. Nobody else is going to see it. While you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, presumably everybody can now see my screen with the big purple. Yeah, okay, good, thank you. All right, so you've got your signature, and here's a way to get in touch with me. We're doing this in 2 one-hour sessions because it's a lot to take in. I'm going to give you a lot of information and show you a lot of signatures. And so during the week, I'd like you to practice up a bit, and you're free to contact me. Here's my email address.
You'll have access to the recording also, so you can watch again if you'd like.
Yeah, you'll want to probably see again. So here we'll start with a little levity because these days you may find a lot of people not actually writing. Kids in middle school and high school are not always able to sign their name because they haven't been taught cursive writing. I'm happy to say that's coming back, but that's for another lecture. But this may be one challenge we have. No, don't worry about this list of stuff. It's just the topics we're going to discuss today. We're here to talk about signatures and how to tell that signatures on the ballot are genuine. And I have to say that the 2 hours that we're going to spend together total are not enough to make you into a document examiner. But my hope is that you'll be able to learn enough about the principles of signature authentication to know what to look for. Because, you know, it's a big problem. NPR says that more than 500,000 absentee ballots were rejected in the 2016 primary. And those were, well, 1% of the vote in Florida, 1% was rejected, not evenly across the electorate. The ones that were most rejected were first-time voters, young voters, and voters of color. And the reasons that they gave were mostly that there was no witness or no signature, no voter signature, that they either mailed too late or what we're seeing now, the slowing of the mail, and that signatures didn't match. So at least we can address that last one. Now, I picked some ballot envelopes that I could find on Google Images from different states. And here in California, you see and by the way, I'm turning to my left because I have another screen over here, and that's where I have to move my mouse arrow. So if you see me looking over here, that's what I'm doing. So the California ballot has, the envelope has this little box here. Now, if you have big, showy writing, it might be hard for you to fit it into that little box. And so that could have an effect on your writing. Here in New Jersey, we've got not a box, but a fairly short line. And you see Hawaii has a box, but it's a bigger one. They're all a little different. So my friend and colleague, Ruth Holmes, who is here with us today, was telling us the other day that she approached the, I believe it was the Attorney General in her state, Michigan, and actually got them to stop using a box so that it would be easier for people to sign. So we're talking about signatures. What is a signature? It is a unique symbol of your identity, the mark you use to represent yourself to the world. And those are important words, symbol and mark. Because, you know, we think of a signature as your first and last name, maybe an initial, but it isn't necessarily just that. And we're going to see some examples that it can be something other than just your name. But basically, writing your signature is something that you've done over and over and over throughout your life, thousands of times. So it becomes habituated to you, and you don't even have to think about it. You just write it out, and you know, you do it automatically. Traditionally, signatures had to be written in cursive, not anymore. In fact, we're seeing more and more printed signatures. So what a signature is, it's a mark that's intended to authenticate a document and prevent fraud, and it carries the power to execute a contract or other document like a ballot. Well, let's look at some examples of not first and last name. Here we have what we might call symbolic signatures. You know, a signature might have an underline, extra dots, all kinds of extra things in them that are not actual letters. And here, this is an actual signature. It kind of looks like a swastika to me, but I'm sure it wasn't meant to look that way. But it's just kind of a scrawl, a few lines. And I will say that a signature that has low detail is easier to forge than one with a lot of detail that's carefully written. This one here on the right, I have to remember to put my arrow over on this screen. This is Angelina Jolie, the actress. And you see, you wouldn't know that that was her name from the signature, but that is her legal signature, her autograph. And down here happens to be Brad Pitt, where he uses just his initials, but in a very stylish way. And that seems to be his consistent signature. So your signature may be a symbol. You can make it like a logo. It may or may not have your initials, or it could be a full signature. It may be complex, like this one is quite complex, and it's kind of a logo. It's a very stylish design, or it could be very simple, like this one. This would be one that would be easier to forge. Now, I thought I would, just kind of for fun, show you some symbolic signatures that people have subconsciously written. It's not that they're thinking about making these designs in most cases, but it's tied up with what they do. And here, this is the signature of a spine doctor. And you see this wiggly line here. It looks like a spine lying down. Here we have, if you're old enough to remember Lorena Bobbitt, this is John Bobbitt, whose signature contains a butcher knife. Andres Segovia, the guitarist, Spanish guitarist, he draws his guitar in his signature. Walt Disney, and again, if you're old enough to remember when Walt Disney introduced his show, he would wear an engineer's cap, and he had this little train. So this looks like his cartoon train. Here we have Johnny Depp, and to me this looks like his Pirates of the Caribbean hat. This is Serena Williams, who you can visualize jumping up and hitting her tennis racket, hitting the ball over the net. And this is a steamship, a cruise ship captain. You can see the ship on the water. And finally, Valentin Gebhardt was a World War I fighter pilot ace. And you see the little plane that he's drawn in here, the wings and the front of the plane. So people make signatures in all interesting different ways. Oh, I forgot one. This guy who signed his name twice is a sleep disorders doctor. So he's kind of drawn a bed in his signature. Okay, now I'm going to do a little exercise to see how perceptive you are. Here's two pictures. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to see what the differences are between the pictures. And there should be, look for 6 of them. Okay. And I'll show you where they are. You see here, there's something behind the house that's not here. Here, there's no window. She has her keys in her hand over here. She's wearing a badge. And there's no house over here. So if you found all of those in a quick period of time, we'll say that you've got good perceptive skills. You make a good handwriting examiner, because you've got to hone in on the small points. Now let's talk for a minute about legibility. Some people are highly legible and some are not. And this person, our former President Barack Obama, has an illegible signature. And I picked 2 signatures to compare. If this top one was on your voter registration card or driver's license, whatever in your state they give you to compare to, and you got this one on the ballot, what would you say? I mean, I would not blame you for saying, this is not genuine, because when I first saw it, that's what I thought. This can't be genuine. Look how slowly it's written and all in pieces. Those are hallmarks of a forgery. But then I saw a video of President Obama signing a bill with 6 different pens. I think it was 6. And so what he would do is he would make a stroke, and then he would change pens and make another stroke and keep changing pens. And that was what caused the problems in this signature. But notice it's also, he spelled out his name in the bottom one here, whereas he doesn't in the top one. He writes it very quickly. So something like that you might call into question and ask the voter to verify that that was actually their signature. This is Jack Lew, who was President Obama's Secretary of the Treasury. And the top signature was his genuine natural signature. But when he became Secretary of the Treasury, people got upset about it. They said, oh, it looks like a slinky. You shouldn't be writing like that. You should have a clear signature. And so he developed this signature on the bottom. But again, if this was the signature on top on his registration card, and this was on his ballot, it might be something that you would call into question. And you wouldn't know unless you asked the person to verify. Steve Jobs, on the other hand, has a very clear and open signature. It's not identical, and it's not going to be. But you see the J is a little bit different, but the whole flow of the signature is very natural, and you can see that the same person probably wrote it. Here is another very illegible pair of signatures, and these were made by Quentin Tarantino, the director. And they're somewhat different from each other. So this is a case where you would need something more to verify. And a signature like this is so easy to forge. It's really not a good idea. If you have a signature like that, I would strongly suggest considering making it clearer, and then let the voter registrar know if you've changed your signature. Bill Gates, like Steve Jobs, I find that these tech guys tend to have clearer signatures. And you can see again, it's not identical. The T-bar on the top is longer and a little different shape, but overall, it looks like the same person wrote it. This one down here is an attorney, a big shot attorney, and he has a very illegible signature. It would be a little harder to simulate, but it's not got very much definition. And then, was there a question?
Yeah, this is Emily. I just have one quick question. So you're saying a bunch of times you can tell the same person wrote it, and I just want to check and make sure that you're going to go into more detail about how you can tell that later, and that this is an overview to give us a sense of what you're going to be talking about. Is that true?
We're going to go into a lot of detail.
Great.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to break it all down. Okay, so Del Webb has a very illegible but complicated signature. So right now, this is an overview, legibility versus illegibility. Jenny Craig, this is her logo signature, but you can see it's her handwriting. And this is a more natural example of her writing. This is Melania Trump. It's not legible, but it's consistent. There are some differences here. She crosses the T, here she doesn't. But again, you can see that the same flow is there. Billie Eilish, the singer, has a simplified signature that would be harder to, easier to forge because there's not a lot of detail. On the other hand, Martha Stewart has a very strongly detailed signature that would be much harder to simulate. And again, it's not exactly the same. So I like this, this quote, uniqueness is like a signature. Nobody can forge its exact copy. And a signature, if you see an exact copy of a signature, one of them is fake. And we're going to talk about why. So the fact is that some people are highly consistent in the way they sign. I have had a case where a man signed the same way. He signed a Social Security card when he was 18, and in his 80s, he still signed extremely consistently. Other people have several different signature styles and are not consistent. Again, a distinctive signature and a cursive signature is harder to forge than a scribbly one. So what's important is the key characteristics appear similar each time you sign. That way it can be authenticated. Okay, and here's basically why. Again, restating why a signature can be authenticated. These are the two main principles of signature authentication. No individual signs his or no individual signs his or her name exactly the same way twice. If it's exactly the same, one of them is a fake, and research has proved this. There's a Dr. Srihari in New York at a university who has proved this. And also that no two individuals write exactly the same way. It's like a fingerprint. Now, we all learn to write in school, but because our personalities are different, our education is different, our physiology, our environment, those are different. And so our handwriting develops to become unique to us. Like if somebody writes you a letter, somebody that you see their handwriting on the envelope, even if it doesn't have a return address, you know who that person is because you recognize the handwriting because it's unique to them. But there are factors that affect the handwriting, and we group them into three different sets of factors. The first one is the physical factors, and that would include age, health, eyesight, physical condition, and fatigue. So somebody who is quite old may, it's an individual thing, but they may, their aging may affect their handwriting because there's something called essential tremor, where there's no diagnosed physical problem, but the hand shakes and it's difficult to control the pen. So there's that. There's in the health conditions like Parkinson's disease, there's a feature called micrographia where the handwriting becomes tiny, and other muscular diseases would obviously have an effect on handwriting because of the ability to hold the pen and to move the pen. If you have an injury, if your shoulder was injured or your wrist, that's going to have an effect on the way your signature looks. And even if you're tired. Chemicals also have an effect. Alcohol, drugs, some types of medication. If you took a Xanax or an Ambien and then you sign your name a little bit later, that certainly is going to have an effect on your handwriting. We're going to look at examples. Hand-eye coordination. Somebody who is very fluent in writing and rhythmic and just really graceful will have a different appearance to their handwriting than somebody who's kind of clumsy and maybe accident prone. And also mental status. Their intellect will have an effect, and we'll look at an example of that. Here's the Seagram's company did a study, and they gave people alcohol over a period of time and had them write. You see, at the party begins, they had them write, "I can drive when I drink." They give them 2 more drinks and have them write again, then 4, then 5. Then after 7 drinks, here's the same person writing, "I can drive when I drink." Well, if you can't even control the pen, is the message, how can you control a car? But the bottom line is the alcohol affects your handwriting. And here's another example of that. This guy in a bar who had all these drinks and signed for them, and see what happened, how different his signature is from the top to the bottom. Same thing is true of drugs. The person who wrote this on the left was on heroin. The one on the top right was on cocaine. Now, I will say that not all cocaine users are going to write like this. There's a whole wide range, but this is one example. And the one on the bottom is an attorney who was drunk all the time. And in fact, he would go to court standing up drunk, and yet he won an unprecedented 6 death penalty cases. But this is the effect of the alcohol on his handwriting. Now, before we go on to the mechanical factors, which is next, are there any questions? Anybody have anything they want to say? If so, you can unmute yourself. Okay. And we'll move on to the
I'm
next.
sorry, Sheila, I actually have the setting that people cannot unmute
Oh,
themselves. for-
okay, but then maybe put it in the chat.
Let's give a moment for people to ask any questions in the chat.
Yes, sorry. Okay. You can interrupt me if you see questions, okay? Mechanical factors are things like the writing materials and your pen and paper. So if you had a very porous paper and you were writing on it with a thick felt tip pen, the ink would soak into the paper and it would make the writing look different than if you used, say, a fine tip pen and glossy paper. That would look different also. The writing surface makes a big difference. If you're writing on a desk or a table, that's good. Writing on a magazine is going to change things like the pressure because of the way the pen presses into the soft surface. If you were writing, if you had your ballot on somebody's back and were signing it, or if you're sitting up in bed and on your knees, that would be different. If you were writing on a picnic table, the old style ones that are wood, that could make a difference to the way your signature looks and your position. There's something called guided hand, and that is if somebody is infirm and they're in bed or maybe in a wheelchair and they have full possession of their faculties, but they're weak and they can't hold the pen, they may ask somebody to help them, and that's called a guided hand signature. The thing with that is the person who's guiding the hand doesn't know the reasons why the person signs their name the way they do. And so their writing habits may influence as they push the hand. So that's something to be aware of too. And sometimes there's coercion. So not likely in this case unless somebody is being forced to vote for somebody they don't like. Okay, no questions? Then we will go.
So let me, actually, there was a question before that I missed.
Okay.
Jan says, in Michigan, you may just make a mark, but it will be on your master voter record, so it should be made the same way. If we're advising people who cannot sign but can make a mark, what would you advise us to say?
Oh, that's a difficult one because, you know, a mark is so much easier to forge. I would say that as long as it's consistent with what you have on file, then that's the best you can do. If you can make something more complex than just like an X, for instance, that would be better. I hope that helps. The third set of factors that affect handwriting are physiological, like mood. And you might notice next time you're angry or excited or elated, if you sign your name, it may actually be bigger and maybe slanted more to the right because our emotions have an effect on our handwriting. If you're patient or impatient, if you're depressed, those things all have an effect. Now, handwriting changes over time. And here's an example with President Richard Nixon. And we start here in 1968, the year before he took office. Well, the next year he was in office and his signature started to get a little less complex, thinned out. In 1973, here's what happened. And when he left office, here's what happened. Now, because you're all muted, I can't hear your collective gasp, but I know every single time I've given this lecture in person, that's what you hear. Because it's just like, it's like an EKG or an EEG.
We do have one comment in the chat. He had some psychological changes he went through.
He certainly did. And actually, a few years ago, I contacted the Nixon Library and asked for later signatures to see whether he went back to his original signature. And what they told me was that he rarely signed his name at all. Usually he just signed his initials with a circle around them. So they sent me some examples of that. Okay, let's go back now to school and learning to write. If you're an older adult and learned to write in the United States, you probably learned the Palmer method, which was popular up to the mid-1950s. But you see how it's got so many curlicues and extra strokes that are time wasting. The Zaner-Blosser method, which is actually older, but it started to be used more later because it taught a manuscript or printed style before, which actually handwriting analysts don't like, but they taught that before they taught the cursive writing. And when my kids went to school in the 80s, well, they're in their 40s now, but the Danelian style has been taught, which, as you can see, is much simpler. You don't have all those time-wasting little fancy curlicues. And today, there are others, and cursive logic is one that we like in my organization. It's a nice simplified copybook, and also New American Cursive, which was developed by one of our members. So when you go to school, if you think back to around the 3rd grade when you started to learn to write, you learned your individual letters first. And so we would say you write one letter at a time. That's letter impulse. Oops, went the wrong way. When you string those letters together and you can learn to write whole words, you're writing in word impulse. And then finally, you know a bunch of words and you can put them together in a sentence. And so you're writing in sentence impulse. At that point, we could say that you are using class characteristics. And what that means is that you've learned a specific copybook style, whether it's Palmer, Zaner-Blosser, Danelian, or another. You've learned that style. You learn how to write with that. So we call that a class, in other words. But what happens after that, once you're comfortable with it, you begin to simplify it or embellish it with other strokes. And so then we say that you have brought your own individual characteristics, the unique things that make your script yours and that other people are unlikely to use in the same combination. And once you've done that, we say you have individualized your writing. And with individualization comes graphic maturity. And basically what that means is you know how to write. You don't have to stop and think about every little piece of writing. You just write. And when you've done that, you have created a master pattern unconsciously. And a master pattern is the way that you write all of the different ways that you write each letter. So in this example, we have a capital A at the beginning of a word, a different kind of an A in the middle of the word, and another A yet on the end of a word. So this particular person writes with 3 different styles of A. So that's their master pattern for that letter. And each letter is going to have its own natural variations. So let's take a moment of levity and again, ask any questions so far. Okay.
Hold on. So there aren't any questions, but there are a couple of comments I'd like to share.
Okay.
So, Dr. Laura, who works with a group called Clean County, an election protection group, says they've been involved with many official signature verification checks for citizens initiative petitions with thousands of signatures. And honestly, there are so many variations in the signatures that you end up eyeballing it. The first letters of both names are close. If the first letters of both names are close and the general appearance is close, then we usually have approved it. So she says, I just want to assuage some anxiety about this.
Okay, yeah, we don't want anxiety because there are going to be lots of times when it's inconclusive. And even as experts, we sometimes have to say inconclusive, and we don't like to do that. But at least that gives in some states, it gives the person the opportunity to verify their signature, and that's fine.
And thank you. And then another comment from Jennifer Tanner, who says, I was involved in a forged signature from someone who had practiced a signature for years, and when his partner was sick, forged the signature and stole her money. The only way this was caught is because he faked it perfectly, is because we had an expert involved and found out her signature had changed since she was sick and was nothing like the forgery. We won the case.
Yeah, those are the kind of cases that we get, exactly like that. So this wife says, now we've got a joint account. I won't have to forge your signature anymore. But what is a forgery? it's a crime of falsely and fraudulently making or altering a document. So if the person has the intent to commit the crime, then that's different from if a husband or wife gives you permission to sign their name for them. You're not trying to forge their name. Now get your pens and paper again, because I want you to do this little exercise. This is the name Jennifer Trigé, and I would like you just to take a moment and see how well you can copy. Will make you the, well, you won't be a forger because it's not an intent to commit a crime, but you can simulate this name. So how did that feel? It's really difficult to simulate somebody else's signature, isn't it? And we're going to talk about why. But now, sometimes what a forger will do is turn the known signature, the model signature, upside down, because what happens when you do this is it changes the frame of reference. You don't look at the letters, you just look at the shapes. And so try doing it that way and see if it's any easier. It's a pretty clear and open signature to try and copy.
While we're doing that, we have a question. Do you give probabilities instead of a binary yes or no?
In court, we have a scale, and the one that I use from the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners has 7 points on it. So in the middle is inconclusive, and the ones on the right are probably did right, strong probability did right, or can't think of the word, but it's like, oh, identification, which means you absolutely are sure. And then the same thing on the left side of inconclusive, probably did not, strong probability did not, or you know, exclusion. Okay, so how does that feel? Any better? No. I can only see a few of you at a time, so I don't know. But just for your own self.
I can't copy it upside down. I did not find upside down any easier. I won't even bother. It was easier to simulate when resisting the temptation to view the result. Looking only at the original produced a more believable result.
Okay, just a little. All right, let's talk about range of variation.
Someone's asking, could you please flip it right side up again?
Okay, sure.
And someone else says upside down seems easier.
Okay, here's what I'd like you to do now. Sign your name 5 times, the way you are normally sign it. Now try to sign it twice exactly alike. You're not going to be able to do it, I can assure you. Is anybody able to sign their name identically? No. Some of you will have had more consistent signatures than others. Now look at this is what we're looking at here is a bunch of seashells, and they're all the same. I don't know, do you call seashells a species or a genus? It's all the same type of seashell, but every one of them is a little bit different in the coloring, the shades, the hues, and that's how it is in handwriting. Everyone who writes has their own personal range of variation, which basically means how many different ways do you sign your name, or how many different ways do you write. So what we do is to look at the signature as a picture, look at the whole thing first, and see how smoothly it flows, how naturally, and then we'll look at the other writing habits. And we can categorize all of the writing habits, first of all, the big picture, into 3 categories. First of all, we've got arrangement, form, and movement. So under arrangement, we look at how is the signature laid out? How does it look on the signature line? How much space is there between the words and the letters? How does it sit? And I'm going to show you examples of all of them. The form is basically the style. It's the letter designs, how it looks, the shape, and what style it is. Like, was it a particular copybook? Is it cursive? Is it printed? Is it simple or is it embellished? The movement, that is some kind of more complex things that we don't have a lot of time to go into, but it's about how fast it's written, how rhythmic it is. If you think of rhythm in dances, all the different kinds of dances there are. It's like that in handwriting. Pressure, how much the letters are connected from one to the other, and how natural it is. Here's an example of a signature that is not natural. Elizabeth Dole, it looks more like a drawing. So that is very carefully done, as opposed to Jackie Kennedy, who has a much more flowing, natural looking writing. And we'll see what that really means. There are lots of things that become writing habits. And again, I've already talked about some of these. This is Michael Jackson handwriting, his signature. Big and showy and just about what you would expect. But let's look at some checkpoints, the kinds of things that you're going to be looking at. Handwriting is broken up into 3 zones. We have the middle zone, which comes between these 2 lines here, where I've written George Washington. And that's the middle zone, the vowel letters and the M's and N's and R's, letters that don't rise above the line or fall below it. The lower zone are the loops that come below that line, and the upper zone is anything that comes above it, like the loops on the H, L, K, B. Okay, so we look at the zones, we look at the proportions between the zones, like how tall are the capital letters compared to the small letters. Those proportions can be important, and they're not likely to change in authentic signatures. We look at how much space is left between the letters. We look at how wide the letters are, how tall they are, the space between the words. We look at the final stroke, and or you can call it the terminal stroke, whichever you like. And that's the last stroke before the pen is picked up on the word. The initial stroke or the beginning stroke is where the pen first goes down in each word. Here we have slant, and you can't really see. Well, yeah, you can. Okay, so the slant is how far, or you could call it slope if you prefer, how far to the right or to the left sometimes does the letter slant. And then we have how connected are they? How well are they linked? And where do they sit on the baseline? So those are all the things that we're going to be looking at. Here's some examples of capital letters. Oprah has a very large O, and it's showy, and it's much larger than her last name. So you want to look at the proportion of their capital letters to each other as well as to the name. This one here starts out low and smaller, and then the middle initial is larger, and the capital letter is even larger. This one has no capitals at all, and it has a slash right through the name, which is not a good thing to do, but that would be a habit that you would expect to be consistent. Jeff Bezos is a very simple, medium-sized, looks like it was just thrown down on the paper without a care. Abraham Lincoln has tall capitals. He just used his first initial, and the rest of the writing is simple. Wolfgang Puck up here has large showy writing with the P on Puck is very large. And notice too, he puts an underline here. That's called a paraph. It's an underline. So that's something extra, and you would want to look at that too. This last one is very loopy signature with a large extra loops on the E. So capitals are very important. the shape of the writing is important. So we see different kinds of shapes: rounded, angular, and thready. Rounded shapes, you see in Bill Clinton's writing on the bottom, it's like a cup. It's very rounded. And so that is a person who writes their particular shape finds it difficult to write a different shape. So you see here this other example I found was quite consistent, with the main difference being the length of the terminal or the final stroke, which is also, this is called blunt stroke. It's thick at the end. Some strokes will thin out at the end, that we call them tapered strokes. And Governor of Texas, former Governor Ann Richards, has an angular writing. You see sharp points, straight lines. And her name, I'm going to also point out, talking about shapes, but I want to also point out that she writes her name almost on top of each other. So there's no space. You got to look at the space between the words. This example that I found, and I don't know the difference in time between these two samples, but the one major difference was the way she does her final stroke. Here it curves under, and here it goes up. So that's part of her variation, but the rest of the writing looks like it's pretty much, you can tell that it's done by the same person. Oliver North, if you're old enough to remember the Iran-Contra hearings, writes thready writing. And what thread is indefinite. It lacks details. It doesn't have the form of the roundedness or the angularity. It just kind of like if you took a ball of yarn and threw it out. That would be thread. Any questions about that?
So we've got one question from up above. Have there been studies seeing how well the 7 levels of your findings match with known forgeries and matches?
There have been studies. There have been studies on the accuracy of the document examiner. I don't know about the scale. There are several different scales. One of them uses 5 points. One of them uses 9. The one I use is 7. So it's part of that is subjective, where the document examiner feels that the writing falls on the line. So it's really more a case of how accurate the document examiner is.
Okay. And looking at my own 5 signatures that I wrote and looking at how different they are makes me think we'd be better off if the process of registering of signing something officially where our signature is going to be matched, like a voter registration card, if we had to sign it multiple times so that the variation in how we sign could be seen.
That's an excellent point, and maybe we can put that on our agenda, get that done. Okay, the next habit we're going to look at is connectedness.
Thready.
Sorry?
Someone is saying they don't understand what you meant by thready.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go back to Oliver North, right here. See how indefinite, it just looks like a straight line. You can't tell what it says. And here, this is an H, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. Just think of it as indefinite and lacking detail. And we'll see some more of those, so hopefully it'll come clearer. Connectedness is the degree that how many letters are linked together. Some people will link every letter, including the capitals. Some break at syllables. And it's not as common for signatures to be highly disconnected, but it's getting more common. So here, James Baker, except for his capital on his first name, he keeps everything connected. And he uses a middle initial. He connects his last name. He uses, I guess that's the third. So that's another thing to check is any titles, PhD, MS, the third. Things like that. Chris Rock over here, he signs this. I guess this is Chris, but it ends here, and then Rock is all made in one stroke until it gets to the last stroke here. Again, it's very individual. Marion Wright Edelman has highly disconnected writing. This is almost to the level of threadiness here. Adam Werbach prints his name. Then we have mixed connectedness. Patricia Cornwell has a break here in this, I guess that's at the syllable, and she uses a middle initial and a break in the middle of her last name. Barbara Bush does the same thing. She breaks here in the middle and in her last name. So it's just a matter of seeing what the habit is. And even though you only have 2, possibly 3 signatures to compare, do the best you can. That's all you can do. This writing habit is slant, and remember that's how far the loops lean over. And the easiest way to look is these upper loops, the upper zone loops. And Robin Williams' signature, he leans over quite far. Also, let's notice that he's got a long rising final stroke that ends blunt because it's thicker. He also has quite a wide space between his first name, Robin, and Williams. Wolfman Jack down here leans to the left, and he has he's got a logo signature that would be hard to forge. Faye Kellerman's signature is straight up and down, very slight leaning to the left, and notice her ending stroke, which is curved up, and it thins out a little bit here. And Chris Darden, who you may remember from the O.J. Simpson trial, his signature goes in many different directions. It slants forward and backwards and forward again. And he has a terminal stroke that's long and wavy. Okay, questions?
Yes, there are a bunch of questions.
Okay.
And we're getting close to the hour. I don't know if you...
Oh my. Okay, well.
5 more minutes. And if people will often stay longer, but I don't know if you're up for doing that. So
I can stay as long as you need.
okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
So let's see. So we've got, the first question is,
and let me interrupt and say, remember, this is why we're doing one session now and one next week, so you have a chance to practice and get your questions, and you are welcome to email your questions to me during the week.
great. And so if any of these questions are things you're going to cover next week, it's fine to just say that.
Okay.
I've heard Miriam says, I've heard that immigrants' signatures may vary due to confusion between their original names and their anglicized names.
That's something that hasn't come up. You know, with there is an effect of culture on writing, and I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but it's easy to see when people have learned to write in another language originally, and then they're anglicizing their names or writing in a style that's not familiar to them. So again, I would say just make sure that however they sign, that they sign on their registration card so that it's a match. It doesn't matter how they sign as long as it's consistent.
Thanks. And Ellen says, many supervisors of election are automating signature verification. How does the machine differ from the human eye?
Well, that's really bad. And I've worked some years ago with somebody who was trying to automate signature authentication, and it's an extremely challenging and difficult thing because there are so many aspects of writing that a machine is not going to pick up. And there's individual characteristics. What I found, and I do have software of my own, but it's for personality assessment with handwriting. But what I found is there are 10 items in handwriting that are measurable. But there's a whole lot of other stuff that's important that's not measurable. So I don't like it.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be nice to automate it because there's so many signatures, but not a good idea.
My understanding, and I haven't researched this a ton, is that when they do use a computer program, what that will do is it will decrease the number that need to be looked at by hand. So if they don't match, if the computer it can't say that they match, then people look at them.
Okay, well that's a little better. Okay.
So Bruce
Okay.
says one thing that we really need to be careful about in the voting context is the security of the sample signatures. If malefactors cannot get hold of the sample signatures, the samples, forging them will be difficult. That difficulty would be the main basis for security of the match.
Yeah, well, we'll look at some of that in a minute.
And Ellen asks, what's the difference between righties and lefties?
Well, nothing. And I can tell you why I can say that, because in 1989, I think it was, I undertook a study where I collected 132 handwriting samples. Half of them were left-handed, half were right-handed. And in each sample, each set of writings, half were male and half were female. And so I scored them on 5 different aspects. And people think that if you're a left-hander, you're going to slant to the left. Well, what I found was, out of the entire 132 people samples, 2 people slanted to the left, and they were both right-handers. And in the other 4 features that I was studying, there were no differences. So,
as a lefty, I can say one difference sometimes is there might be a smear on the left-hander's signature because of it writing in English or languages that move in the same direction, because sometimes our hand drags across if the ink is still wet.
oh, you're a lefty, huh?
Yeah, I used to get ink all over
Yeah.
the back of my hand when I was writing.
I have 2 left-handed children, so I have some experience with that. But there are 2 kinds of lefties. We call them hookers and pushers. And it sounds like you are a pusher. So the hookers hook their hand around so that they don't smear. Yeah.
Yes.
That's left-handedness. Oh, what I wanted to say about that was left-handers sometimes, but not always, cross their T's from right to left. And so the way to see that is if the T-bar thins out to the left, they have probably crossed from right to left. And also, there's a tendency in some left-handers to, I don't want to get into this because it's too complicated, but to reverse their pressure patterns. And we'll talk about pressure next week, and we'll talk about that.
Great. Gretchen asks, how many people sign differently in formal situations versus everyday situations? My daily signature is fairly different from my driver's license signature.
Yeah, that's a very individual thing. And I think in celebrities, they have, the ones that I've seen, they will have a very different public signature from a private one. And I haven't seen any statistics on the percentage of people that do that, but I think it's probably quite common. If we're signing something like, you're signing a check to the IRS for $5,000 that you don't want to send them, your signature may be a little different than if you're signing a birthday card. So but again, the key characteristics are still going to be there. There are thousands of variables in handwriting, and the things that change are not going to be that significant most of the time.
Okay, so let's see, there's a bunch more comments. I don't see any of them labeled as questions. So one more is, are there big differences between signatures of newlyweds who have changed their names?
Oh, there can be. I never was able to write my second husband's name, as I had to stop. I found it impossible to write my name with his. And again, it's an individual thing. So it takes a while. If you change your signature, I changed my signature. The first time I got divorced, my signature was very clear and simple, and it's still clear, but I changed it completely because I wanted to completely disassociate myself from that person. And it took a while. So whenever you make a change to your signature, it's going to take a while to get used to it. So, but it's a totally individualistic thing. Depends on the person. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
Okay, then 2 more comments that I just want to read so that people watching the recording can hear them, because they won't be able to see the chat. Kelly Clayton says, on California's website, sos.ca.gov, which is the Secretary of State's website, it says, in quotes, if your info is found and you authorize election official use of your DMV signature, an electronic image of your DMV signature will be added to your voter registration application. If no signature is on file with the DMV, print and sign the application. And then
let me interrupt you and say that Although it's better to have more than one signature if you can, the signatures on a driver's license are awful for the most part. I will, in a signature authentication case, I won't use those unless there's nothing else available.
What's awful about them?
They just, the quality of them just, it doesn't look, in most cases, it just doesn't look like the person's signature.
Wow. Okay.
Unless, you know, I mean, unless there's some new technology that I haven't seen yet.
Okay. Good to know.
But it's better to have it than nothing.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Laura says, just a note to everyone, in all of Illinois, there is a new signature verification process. 3 judge panels are going to watch each signature, no more than 2 people on the panel from the same party, and it will take all 3 to agree to toss out a ballot due to signature mismatch. If the envelopes are not closed or no signature at all, then only 2 judges will be able to disqualify, 2 judges could disqualify a ballot. And Dr. Laura, it looks like we're not going to have time for you to talk more about what you're doing in Illinois, but if you could join the circle and scrutineers if you haven't yet, that's for voter signature authentication. We can give you a way in there to share information with people about what you're doing that they may want to duplicate in their states. So let's see. So a couple, there's more questions. Should I keep going or should we let you go back to your
It's up to you. I have, I think, about 4 more slides like this.
Let's go back to your slides and then we'll take more questions if you're still up to it at the end. And I want to be really respectful of your time and everyone's time here and remind people that we also do have next week.
Yeah, and if anybody needs to leave, they can watch the video and see the rest of it.
And that will be posted by tomorrow.
Okay, great. All right, so the next habit that we're going to discuss is size. And you see John Hancock, you probably know his signature from the Declaration of Independence. And the legend is, we don't know if it's true, but they say that he said he signed it big and bold so that King George could read it without his spectacles. And that's why we use his signature to celebrate National Handwriting Day on January 23rd. But he has a very big writing. It's very full of details. It has a paraph here underneath. So that would be hard to simulate. On the other hand, well, this, not on the other hand, but here is a small signature, Edward Spreitzer, who happens to be a serial killer. He writes very small and simple. In this case, Anne Perry, the writer, has very tall capitals, especially her last name. So looking at the proportions, and this, for the person who didn't understand thready, this is an excellent example of thready writing. You see, it's just kind of a squiggle for her. The letters are broken down. Here, Robert Mondavi has an expanded writing with large first capital, first letter, and it's jammed together so there's no space between the words. Edward Spreitzer has large space between the words. What is large, what is small? If you took the width of the letter M, or in that particular writing, and you could fit that between the words, that would be, you could call that average. Of course, whoops, it might not have, there might not be an M in that name. And then finally, Arnold Schwarzenegger is expanded, and yet the letters are very narrow. So again, you know, don't try to think that you're going to just know all these concepts immediately. I'm just trying to give you a smattering of what to look for. Diacritics. These are things like T-bars and I-dots and accent marks and things that are not part of the writing itself, but they're like in the upper zone. And also, this is not a diacritic, but I added it here. Here's another thready writing. See, the letters break down, they're thready. But this has a tie on it, on the H. It's tied, so that's a habit. The I-dot here in Martha Grimes' writing is high. It's way above the stem, and it's light, but it's rounded, so that's something to look at. Even something as small as the I-dots and the T-bars. Dean Koontz makes an extremely long T-bar with a hook at the end. Elizabeth George, you can't even see her eye dot. It's so light. Clive Cussler, his eye dot is a dash. See, who knew there were so many ways to make eye dots? And there are others. Linda Fairstein has a rounded dot. Sometimes you'll see a circle dot. I didn't find one of those. Speed is another part of handwriting. This is a habit. And we have slow, medium, and fast. Ronald Reagan, and next week we'll go into what is slow, medium, and fast. We'll delve into some of these things a little more deeply. Rosalind Carter, it's quick. One of the things that makes Ronald Reagan slow is how careful it is, and it goes slightly to the left. George, I don't remember which Bush this is because they both have a similar, very similar signature. The son copied the father's. I think this is W. And it's very fast and very thready. So there's a lack of detail here. So speed, somebody who writes slowly cannot naturally write quickly. And it's hard for a person who writes quickly to slow down. We look at the alignment on the baseline, the placement. So here, does the writing just sit straight on the baseline? Does it rise above it? Does it go through it or fall below it? Does the writing go up? Does it slant up off the baseline? Does it slant down? Is it indented? Does it sit right at the beginning of the line, or does it even go to the left of the line? Those are all things that we'll look at too. And then we've talked about word spacing, but here's another example. Paul Sand connects both of his names, Paul and Sand. Jenny Craig doesn't connect them, but she, you know, they're almost connected. She overlaps. Sorry, senior moment. The spacing in Dick Cheney's two names is very close. And Candace Leitner, hers too. She's the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers founder. It's too close. Dr. Kevorkian, his is medium. And here we have Diego Rivera, who uses his middle initial, and he has quite wide spacing. And widest of all is our dear Judge Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg. She has very wide spacing between the words in both of these examples that I found. Okay, I want to just do this. There are different types of forgery. We have traced forgeries where the person takes a model signature and they actually put it on the document and might maybe put it with a light source behind it, like a window or some kind of, or on a light table, and actually trace over the name. Usually that doesn't come out looking great. Today there's digital cut and paste, which you wouldn't have on a ballot, but the person, they can actually take a genuine signature and paste it onto a spurious document, and you have a genuine signature. There's what we've been talking about, simulation, where there's an attempt to copy a model, or a freehand forgery, where the person just writes the name and doesn't attempt to copy. And here's an example here. It says Mickey Mouse. They just wrote it. And this one, we don't even know what it says. Of course, that's not going to fly because it won't adhere to the model. But a genuine signature looks natural, and the beginning and ending strokes are usually tapered, not blunt. The connections will be smooth, and there will be some variation. We don't expect it to look identical. Let me see. I want to just... I do have a few more. Do you want me to stop here, or do you want me to continue?
If you're up for continuing, I think that would be good. It looks like people are holding, and anyone who has to leave can watch the rest on the video. And there are a lot of more comments in the chat, and I think the only question that's in there that I think fits in neatly with what you're saying now is about, and if you're going to talk about this next week, it's fine, the difference between people signing on an iPad or another screen versus signing with a pen. And what if you need to compare when one signature was made that?
Yeah, that's problematic. I did a job for Adobe, the software company, where they had a new product called Adobe Sign, where they'd have people sign on an iPad. And they had asked me to analyze their handwriting. We were talking about personality. But the point is, the people would sign on the pad, and almost to a person, they hated their signature and said it didn't look like their normal signature. So then I'd have them sign their name on a piece of paper, and I could see what they meant. It's really problematic signing on an electronic pad, unless in the last couple of years since that, the technology has improved.
Well, there's also the pads where you actually sign with your finger.
Yeah, but you're still, I guess all I can say is that you're still going to have the key characteristics and the flow. That's the important thing, that it flows in the same way. Now, some people don't have a smooth flowing signature. And so the one that you're comparing to, if it's not smooth in the original, then and if it's smooth on the questioned one, then there's a problem. Like you mentioned earlier about the woman, somebody said that the signature changed because the person got sick. So yeah, there are those changes.
Thank you.
Okay, so those were genuine signs of genuine signatures. Signs of simulation. What we first look for is the line quality. Now, a person who is trying to forge a signature or simulate has a choice. They can either write it quickly and more naturally, but it won't look as much like the signature, or they can try to copy the model and make it accurate, but it'll be slower, and so that's not so good either. What a forger has to do is two very difficult things. You know, we talked about all the master pattern, how you all, you know, through your learnings at school and your practice over years, how you develop a master pattern. Well, as a forger, which none of you are, of course, but if you were going to be a forger, you have to set aside that master pattern that you've developed. And then you have to take on the master pattern of the person whose signature you want to simulate. But you don't know all the things that went into making that signature. So it's very, very difficult. And let's see, just a general point that I've said, you can't write at a higher skill level than what's normal for you. So if the writing is highly skilled and you are not, you're not going to be able to simulate it. And sometimes a forger will try to simulate poor skill, and then you get tremor, which we'll be talking a lot about. So also don't rely on initial impressions. Don't just look at it and say, oh yeah, that's fine, because a good forgery may look genuine until you look closer. So if you have a question about one, so somebody's trying to text me about the election. You need to look closer. And the opposite is true. A signature that's written under adverse conditions may not look genuine. But if you apply all these principles and you know that it's not going to be exact and that there may be something affecting it, if the key characteristics are there and a similar flow and it's consistent, then you're okay. So the things to look for in simulation are tremor, which I'm going to show you. That means shakiness. Hesitations, that's when the pen is moving slowly, there can be blobs of ink along the ink line. A change in direction from the standard signature. If it looks like it was slowly drawn when the comparison signature looks fast. Again, blunt beginnings and endings, the proportions of the capital letters to the small letters, and the upper loops to the middle zone. Different initial and final strokes may be a red flag, and letter designs that don't match. So your signature success is when your signature becomes an autograph. So here's a pair of signatures that you may have seen in the news of Donald Trump. And these are two examples of the way he signs his name. And they're a little different because they're a different kind of pen. This top one is his favorite felt type pen, and the bottom one looks like it may have been a thinner felt pen possibly. But there are differences in it, and but overall it's got similar movement and it's written quickly. It would be really difficult to simulate this signature. Joe Biden writes with a very simplified signature, and he's quite consistent, but as you see here, the B is different. The length of the J is different. Even the I dot has a little different form, and the final stroke is longer on this one. Kamala Harris has a very fancy K. Her, it's hard to see. It looks like this was connected to the last name, but I'm not sure. But it's, again, a hard signature to forge, and it's quite consistent, even within her natural variations. And Mike Pence, his name looks like Stephen, but I guess this says Mike Pence and Mike Pence. He has an extremely simplified, thready signature. And I mean, there's thread here, but it's written very quickly. And there's a lot of rhythm. I bet he's a great dancer. It's a really rhythmic signature. These are some examples of forged signatures. These were simulated. And the first thing you should look for is the name spelled correctly? Sometimes stupid forgers don't spell the name correctly. So that's a dead giveaway. The next thing is poor line quality, which is tremor. And notice how shaky and slowly this is written. And I didn't show you the known signatures, but this is the simulated signature. And this
could be the result of an aging or disease process, or could be a forgery, right?
No, this is a forgery. It's written too slowly, and in comparison with, that's why it's important to update your voter registration card if your signature has changed, because things do change. And you need, comparing a signature that's 20 or 30 years old is not appropriate. It's best if you can have something within, you know, say 5 years, unless, if there have been changes. And the bottom one here, the resting dots are ink blobs, are a result of the writing being really slow. And again, this one was not at all consistent with his known signatures. And I'm going to show you this one next week, I believe, with the comparison signatures. But see how shaky it is and jagged. It's not naturally written. There's also something called patching. Now, sometimes a forger will realize that they've made a stroke wrong and they go back and try to correct it. It's like soldering. Like if you solder something, you know, you lay a piece of solder on top so that it'll meld. That's what they do in signatures, in forgeries sometimes. And one here, is this illness or forgery? Which one is the forged signature? Anybody want to take a wild guess? Put it in the chat. Which one?
Are you saying one is accurate and two are forgeries, or
one is a forgery and two are his known signatures? So 1, 2, or 3, which one is the forgery? Just at a quick look. Just see what people say.
we've got, let's see, we've got guesses of mostly 1, but a couple of 2s and 3s.
Okay, well, the 1s have it. This person had some mental challenges too and some health problems, but these 2 and 3 are his known signatures. And this was an actual case, a probate case. He had died and somebody was trying to take over his estate, which was considerable. He had over 50 properties in the LA area and other stuff. So there are a lot of differences that we're not necessarily going to go into right now, but I'll just point out that the middle zone, this is where the person has tried to look less skilled than their own handwriting. But here in his known signatures, the exemplar signatures, you see he's made the letters quite detailed, and the T-bars are wrong, and the shapes of the capitals are wrong. The alignment is wrong on the baseline, and it's just wrong. Okay, this one I'm just showing you as an example of genuine illness where there's tremor. With tremor, the pen is sort of oscillating, and tremor comes in illness because of a lack of control over the pen. Here's another one that's illness. And this one I wanted to show you because it is a person who has low intellectual capacity, but this is how he signs his checks. So you can see that there's a lack of education and a lack of ability to write better. So if a person was to try to forge that name and write it, sign it Roger, then you know that it's wrong because it's beyond the person's capabilities. And then wrapping up, last couple of slides, for two writings to be done by the same person, there must be no unexplainable differences, fundamental differences, which means all of those things that we talked about, age, health, things that affect the writing. If it's explainable, that's something else. But for it to be the same person, there must not be an unexplainable fundamental differences, and there must be a combination of similarities. So all the things that we talked about. And so those fundamental differences are not the same as the natural variations. These are things like the line quality. I'm repeating for emphasis. The pressure patterns, which we haven't really talked about. The skill level, the different ornamentations, the hooks and loops, tremor, the initials and finals, and subtle differences that are not just natural variations. So it could be a difference in the overall size, but the proportions are still the same. And the arrangement on the baseline, the alignment, and all those other things that we talked about. So there would be structural differences and not natural variation. So I would like you to sign your name again and see if it's any different.
And will you talk to us about how you'd like people to practice? What's your suggestion about how we can practice between now and next week?
Yeah, the best way to practice is to, of course, it's hard with social distancing, but if you can get maybe not your family, but friends to send you a picture of their signature and have them try to forge it or to disguise their writing, or have somebody else in their family try to write their signature, that kind of thing, and send you, take a picture with their phone and send it to you. Or anybody that you can think of, or even each other.
Is there anywhere that you know of that there would be a collection of possible matched signatures that people could look at? It would be a really useful resource.
Matched signatures outside what I'm...
Where some of them are done by the same person and some of them are forged.
I don't know. Ruth, do you know of any?
What I would suggest is that you go to googleimages.com and you can Google any person and it might give you 10 50-cent signatures or something like that, but you can get any image, but just go for whatever person you want to think about and you will see the variation of hundreds, thousands of people.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because that's where I got most of my signatures from. I was thinking about people that you know, but yeah, you can get any famous person in Google Images. You won't know, like if you do sports figures, you won't know if they're genuine or not because so many of them are not. But you can at least look and see which ones look like they're similar.
Great, thank you. And Lulu says, be careful about posting your signature on social media or even emailing it. So please, everyone, use your good judgment about that. And
well,
so if you are, those of you, so I'm sorry. First of all, Sheila, thank you so much. This has been tremendously helpful. I can't remember when the last time is I learned so much in such a short period of time about anything. It was fascinating and really, really helpful. And I'm excited about next week as well. And then I wanted to say, for those of you who are watching, if you are talking about with folks at your elections office or Board of Elections about, if you choose to share with them that you've been learning about this and they're interested in learning, they're welcome to join Scrutineers and watch the recording of this training. And also, I believe that Sheila is available to be hired by election departments for training as well. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So you could suggest that to your local elections department. Now you know how to get in touch with her. So there's a lot of thank you messages for you in the chat. And folks, remember that we do have a circle in Scrutineers that you can join. That is, let's see, I believe the name of it is Voter Signature Authentication. Voter Signature Authentication Circle. So that's a small group within Scrutineers that you can just join, and we can talk to each other. Some of the questions that were asked here that are more election related that I didn't ask out loud to Sheila because that's not her expertise, specifically election related, we can discuss and help each other answer there. So
does everybody know that they can save the chat if they want to?
Thank you for mentioning that. So yes, you can save the chat by right next to where you would type in a chat message. And this is true on computers, and I don't think it's true on iPads. There's a little square with 3 dots in it. And if you select that, it says save chat. So you can do that if you'd like. The recording will be posted. I will post it both on the event page and also in the circle. So will be 2 easy places to find it, and it'll be posted by tomorrow. So thank you so much, Sheila, and everyone for being here and for staying longer, for asking and answering questions, and the fantastic information.
Well, I hope it made sense. And
I think it did.
You
weren't getting very many clarification questions.
Maybe they were all just eyes glazed over.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone. Bye for now.